It is not worthwhile to try to put into language the delight that you give me when you receive me in this hearty way. Language is for another office. Language is simply to portray the milder emotions of the human heart, but a welcome like this, a welcome that comes out of the heart, deep down, and expressed in a way that one cannot mistake. That is a thing which moves a man all the way through and through. It does seem to me that in order to get such a welcome, you've got to come all the way from America to Australia. You Australians seem to deserve the title of the cordial nation. I have seen so much of your kindness and have been so moved by it and so charmed with it that in thinking things over, I sit and think sometimes and try to make out the characteristics of this nation and the characteristics of that nation. Try to fasten a trademark on them, putting down one as frivolous, another as ox-like and stupid, a third as vivacious, and so on. It seems to me that you should be branded and trademarked as the cordial nation, certainly when you meet me. And that is most pleasant. That is most delightful. Now, I have been to a great many places where there were things to eat, where there was a supper, and where there was a chairman, and the distinctive quality of that chairman was always to make a speech that had nothing in it, which you could use as a text afterwards. That was the way with all the chairmen I ever saw, except this one. But he has really so loaded me up with texts that it is an embarrassment of riches. I don't know where to begin. If I used all the texts he has furnished me with, there would be nothing left of us when I got through. There is one fact he brought out happily, which stupid people who speak the English language all over the world are prone to overlook or to ignore, and that is, let us chaff and jaw and criticize one another as we please. When all is said and done, the Americans and the English, and their great outflow in Canada and Australia, are all one. You have not stayed at home all your lives, and you know that sentiment which I have felt so many times. I have been around a good deal here and there in the world, and there is one thing that I have always noticed, and which you must have noticed under similar circumstances. Let one of us be far away from his own country, be it Australia or England or America or Canada, and let him see either the English flag or the American flag, and I defy him not to be stirred by it. Oh, yes, blood is thicker than water, and we are all related. If we do jaw and bawl at each other now and again, that is no matter at all. We do belong together, and we are parts of a great whole. The greatest whole this world has ever seen, a whole that someday will spread over this world and, I hope, annihilate and abolish all other communities. It will be the survival of the fittest. The English is the greatest race that ever was, and will prove itself so before it gets done. And I would like to be there to see it. I'm getting old. I'm getting pretty old. But I don't find it out when I'm around this way. It is when one sits at home, melancholy perhaps, when nothing is going on. But when I'm around this way with my own kind, I don't know that I'm not quite young again, say 15 or 16, and I feel perfectly comfortable. My friend on the right and I were talking just now about that very thing. I said I thought that if I had created the human race, I could have done it. I was asked nothing about it, and I didn't suggest anything, but I thought that if I had created the human race and had discovered that they were a kind of a failure, and had drowned them out, well, I would recognize that that was a good thing. And then, fortified by experience, I would start the thing on a different plan. I would have no more of that 969 years business. I wouldn't let people grow that old. I would cut them off at 30. Because a man's youth is the thing he loves to think about, and it is the thing that he regrets. It is the one part of his life that he most thoroughly enjoys. My friend on the right suggests that we should go as far as 40 years, as he doesn't want any of his 40 years rubbed out. Well, perhaps you really might go up to 40, because then you get a perspective upon youth, and that has its value. That has its charm. But oh dear me, I never would have created age. Age has its own value, but that is to other people, not to those who have it. The chairman, among other things, touched upon my experience as a Mississippi pilot. That is connected with what I'm now talking about. That is one of those things that you engage in when you are young and careless. And a man ought always to be young and careless. Then everything that comes is satisfactory. You don't suppose that I should enjoy being a pilot on a Mississippi steamboat now and be scared to death every time it came a fog? But at that time, fogs and dark nights had a charm for me. I didn't own any stock in that steamboat, and that is one of the very advantages of youth. You don't own any stock in anything. You have a good time, and all the grief and trouble is with the other fellows. Youth is a lovely thing, and certainly never was there a diviner time to me in this world. All the rest of my life is one thing, but my life as a pilot on the Mississippi River when I was young, oh, that was the darling existence. There has been nothing comparable to it in my life since, and speaking of that, I may tell you a little story. I had that sort of instinct which anybody would have who had been separated by long years from a life of that kind. He would look back and remember this thing and that thing, and everything that happened to him when he was young. It was all so dear and so beautiful and so fine, so much finer than anything he had experienced since. Well, I carried out that instinct, and I went out to the Mississippi River about 1880. I had not seen that river for I don't know how long, perhaps for a quarter of a century, and I went there with a sort of longing. One sometimes has a yearning to see again the scenes that were dear to him in his youth, in his prime, in the time when he had the heart to feel, and I thought I would like to see that river and what was left of that steamboat life exactly as I saw it long, long, long ago. And so I went under a fictitious name. I didn't want to be found out. I wanted to be able to go up into the pilot house and talk to that pilot just as I used to see passengers talk to him, and I wanted to ask him the same idiotic questions. And I wanted to get myself loaded up with the same misinformation just as they used to do. So I went under a fictitious name, and the thing went along very well until after I had signed my name John W. Fletcher on the register of the Southern Hotel in St. Louis, the man behind the counter bowed and said pleasantly, "Show Mr. Clemens to number 165. Now, you can imagine the interest I felt when I really was launched on the steamboat. She was a vile, rusty old steamboat, but she was the only one that was going down the river that day, and I wanted to go. I got on board that boat 2 hours before she was advertised to sail. I was so anxious to see again that old steamboat life I had been so familiar with. I knew she wouldn't sail at the time she was advertised, but I knew she would go sometime that week. I was loafing about the decks just as happy as a man could be, noticing details in the construction of that boat, which I hadn't seen in any other boat or ship for ever so long. After a while, there came a curious-looking sort of creature slouching up on the hurricane deck. He accosted me and asked where I was from. I said, from the state of Connecticut, from the city of Hartford in Connecticut. He said, you're a good long way from home. I said, I recognize that. I felt it. Then he said, now I reckon you've no such boat as this there. You never seen a boat like this before? Well, I intimated that I never had. I wouldn't lie to a man like that. He said, I was born and raised away in the interior of Wisconsin. I never saw a river or a steamboat till a week ago. Then I came all the way down in a boat like this. If you like, I'll show you around and tell you the names of the different things and what they're for. Well, he seemed kindly disposed, and I went round with him. He showed me this and that, and I soon saw that lots of information had been furnished to him by an expert. He hadn't got a thing right. Some of those people on steamboats can't be depended upon. And they had just loaded him up, giving him false names for things, or when they gave him the right names, telling him extraordinary uses to which the things were said to be put. So the poor devil didn't know anything about a steamboat at all. Well, he left me, and I didn't see any more of him for some time. When the boat had sailed, I was so impatient that I got up in the morning with the first dawn to see what I could of that majestic river, which used to be as familiar to me as the joints of my own fingers. A river that I knew foot by foot, detail by detail, night or day, for 1,300 miles. I was impatient to find if that old river was still familiar to me. I did hope that I would recognize some parts of it, but when I came up on that hurricane deck and looked around, I saw that hope was blighted. I didn't seem to recognize any part of it at all. At length I saw a place on the right-hand side where there were some willows growing that I thought I did recognize, but no. I knew those willows were, so to speak, creatures of a day, and that there must have been hundreds of them since I was there 20 years before. It was a deep disappointment to me. But then I thought, never mind. I can cheer up the occasion by getting up into that pilot house and letting that man load me up with a lot of lies, as they did the historical passenger.